Before we begin, I would like to give a special shout out to my lovely Patreons because I am just that appreciative. John Borg and James Gibbons, you may be only two, but you are just too special to me. If you would like to join these totally awesome and dashing men in supporting me on Patreon and becoming handsome and dashing yourself, the link is in the video description below. You are my marvels, and I loves ya. Are you ready for the return of the most powerful force in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? A force of nature whose mere presence on the battlefield is enough to turn the tides of war and transform the blood that runs through their enemies' veins into ice. A leader whose wisdom and ingenuity has inspired countless young heroes to reach their full potential and whose ferocity in the face of adversity is only matched by their unparalleled beauty. Yes, my friends, it's the return of Goose. Also, the Marvels are there. So before I begin, there's this fan theory that has been circulating lately that is both simultaneously sad and hilarious, and I absolutely have to share it with you so that I can ruin your day too. Captain Marvel killed Tony Stark, not through actions or on purpose, but because of inaction, or at least because of plot holes. How, I hear you asking? Well, when she gets the Infinity Gauntlet from Peter in Endgame, she decides to play keep away from the children of Thanos with the other female MCU heroes, when she could have just put the darn thing on herself and snapped her fingers, making the wish and getting rid of Thanos right then and there. She would have been okay. Her hand might have been sore for a while, but she would have been okay. Tony Stark would have been okay. Morgan would have been able to keep her dad. Peter Parker wouldn't have gone through such a messed up crisis, wouldn't have had to have dealt with Mysterio because Iron Man would have been around and he would have been like, hey, don't trust that douche canoe. He wouldn't have lost his aunt. He wouldn't have lost his best friend and his girlfriend in the process, all because these guys didn't trust a woman to snap her fingers. Typical men. The Marvels is a 2023 superhero action movie from an upstart, little-known studio called Marvel. It stars Goose the Cat, with additional appearances by Brie Larson, Tiana Paris, and Iman Vellani. In it, Captain Marvel, her estranged niece Monica Rambeau, and young superhero Miss Marvel are swept into an unexpected adventure when Dar-Benn, a villainous space trollop played by Zawe Ashton, finds a magical bangle and uses it to strip other planets of their resources in order to save her own dying world. The surprise side effect of this dastardly plot is that it inadvertently causes the three superheroes to instantaneously switch places anytime they use their powers, which is inconvenient because they have to use those powers to do anything. Hey, Samuel L. Jackson is also in this movie, and this is the first time we've seen his Nick Fury in action for years. What TV show? I have no idea what you're talking about. No idea. You need to get out my face right now! So this is the sequel to Captain Marvel, a movie and a character that leaves a lot of insecure little man-babies cold, many of whom maintain to this very day that her movie is the worst movie that the MCU has ever offered up, which... Really? 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 The simple truth is, Captain Marvel isn't a bad movie. It's fine. It's not great. It's not terrible. It's fine. I've seen it twice maybe, and I admit I have a little difficulty remembering anything specific about it, but what I do remember is that its promotion and messaging was pretty cringy. Marvel made a big deal about Captain Marvel being the first superhero movie featuring a female protagonist, which it wasn't. DC did it first. DC even did it before DC did it. Marvel was patting themselves on the back for something that they should have done a decade before. And to be honest, no fault of Captain Marvel, That rubbed me the wrong way. Not because it was a superhero movie that featured a woman, but because this should have already been done. Marvel apparently felt that a movie that featured a woman should be notable just because it featured a woman, which is really no indication of quality. The reason why I'm going into this truncated history lesson and the possibility of alienating my female viewers more than my general appearance already does is because I want to talk about what separates the Marvels from Captain Marvel. And that is the Marvels treats an all-female superhero team like it's not a big deal. It doesn't need to be highlighted, it doesn't need to be celebrated, and it doesn't need trumpets and clowns and bears dancing on giant beach balls. It's not that the Marvels come together because they're all women. They come together because it happens organically and they work well together and they need each other. It's not because of their plumbing, it's because they're great heroes, and the Marvels never pretends nor even insinuates that they are more or less special just because of their gender, and that is the diversity that I like. It's really the perfect way to make a movie about this. It's a female-led movie, and it's not that big of a deal. The fact that the Marvels are all women are basically a non-issue, and it's never really mentioned anywhere in the story. You never get someone saying, "Oh wow, look at how strong and independent those three are." Never happens. You know, I'm not usually one to whine about pandering, and if you use the word woke unironically, I really think you're a moron. I said what I said. But Captain Marvel and even Avengers Endgame are guilty of pandering, of championing a cause they committed to years after the competition did, and now they're acting like they deserve a medal for it. Not so with the Marvels. This movie is about three superheroes out to do a job, and it never pretends to be anything more or less important than that. And I respect it for that, and it makes this movie far more entertaining without that artificial baggage. Am I being preachy? Probably. But what about the movie itself? I can tell you it's a lot of fun. From the opening moments, the Marvel starts rolling and rarely stops for a breath, and it's a welcome change of pace from superhero movies that start out with an action sequence and then goes quiet for a half an hour before the next set piece. 5 minutes in, the Marvels becomes a long, sustained action sequence, and it's fun! It's so much fun. The way it's staged and directed, it makes it a high-energy delight without making it repetitive or boring. To be honest, the directing in the Marvels is actually quite good. In lesser hands, such a long action sequence would have become numbing, but the Marvels keeps it fresh and interesting. And we can thank the body swapping gimmick for that. This allows us to follow Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel, and Monica Rambeau to different locations instantaneously, swapping out locations and power sets easily and keeping the fights and rescues fresh. It also succeeds in keeping arguably overpowered heroes off guard and off balance, which succeeds in nerfing their powers in a logical way without resorting to plot contrivances. Marvel can't blast the dookie out of the bad guys because if she did, she would suddenly be somewhere else blasting the dookie out of who knows what. Safety first, Captain Marvel. Safety first. This time around, we're introduced to a more human Carol Danvers, a departure from her cold and frankly less likable first few appearances. Despite the fact that in her first movie, Captain Marvel said she didn't have to prove anything to anyone, she sure was acting like she did. Here, though, she's softened. She seems happier and more adjusted, though not without issues. Carol seems to have grown, and surprisingly, despite the trailers to this movie insinuating otherwise, she's not averse to being on a team. She actually welcomes the company and wants to reunite and build bridges with Monica. Monica Rambeau, who we were introduced to as the little girl in Captain Marvel and who we last saw in WandaVision, also avoids the cliches that I could have sworn we were going to get exposed to. I thought she was going to be yet another boring character with a chip on her shoulder, bearing a grudge against someone she thought wronged her, walking around all angry and snippy. Instead, we get someone who is hurt, but still loves her aunt who hurt her. Guys, that's real. She shows compassion and understanding, and although there are a few sore spots that do have to be hashed out between them, the love is still there, and that makes their relationship all the more believable. Paris gives Monica an enjoyable personality and demeanor. In some cases, it's almost bubbly, and it avoids the tropes and, quite honestly, pleasantly surprised me with her warmth. Too often, strong female superheroes are portrayed as cold and emotionless, and it's good to see that tired trend finally being bucked. Kamala Khan, surprisingly, was actually pretty good in this movie too. Granted, some of her fangirling over Captain Marvel was cringy, and to be honest, the worst of it appears in the trailers, aside from this kind of grating twinsies recurring joke that mercifully disappears early on in the film. For real, I actually found Miss Marvel to be a much more palatable character this time around than I did in her Disney Plus series. It seems like all the rough edges have been smoothed out and she's grown into a capable superhero of her own. Also, she's a win for representation because her and her family are Muslim, but again, it's rarely their entire trait, and the movie never tries to be self-congratulatory about it. Just like having three leading women as the heroes of this film, the Khans aren't in the movie because they're Muslim, they're in the movie and just happen to be Muslim. I've heard a lot of people talk about how this is just a typical Marvel formula movie, but could someone point out another Marvel movie that has used the same formula as this one? Because I've noodled this for a while, and I can't think of one. Unless they consider the Marvel formula of doing movies having fun doing a movie. Because if they're having fun doing a movie, I'm fine with Marvel movies being formulaic. I like my movies fun. Plot-wise, The Marvels is not special. I mean, sure, it's hardly terrible, but there are few twists and turns that will surprise you. What makes this movie special is the relationship between the three leads and the camaraderie, care, and mutual respect that they build for each other. The banter that the trio shares is light, funny, and enjoyable, and you really get a sense that all three characters grow throughout the course of this movie. Now, The Marvels does have its flaws, notably the villain, who, while not bad, struck me as one or two rewrites away from being truly great. She isn't evil for evil's sake, she's just trying to save her homeworld in what turns out to be the worst possible way possible. I really wish that The Marvels would have taken more time to develop her and give her some clearer motivation. Of course, if any villain in the MCU ever starts making way too much sense, Marvel has to make them irredeemably evil, and we see this happen with Dar-Benn as well. Minor spoilers here, but at the end of the film, she's offered a solution that makes her entire scheme meaningless and presents her with a genuine and non-violent way to save her world. Her response? She betrays the Marvels and continues her plan, which makes absolutely no sense to do so. I wouldn't have minded if the Marvels and Dar-Benn came to a mutual agreement to end the conflict. Maybe parted ways amicably. Bad guys don't always have to be bad guys, and we don't have to destroy them at the end. Sometimes we can defeat evil by changing its mind. I think that the Marvels returns a sense of fun to the MCU that's been missing for a while. Sure, we have had fun, but a lot of the fun has struck me as manufactured and fake.
Giant goats!
The Marvels isn't going to win any awards or accolades, but it is a perfectly enjoyable and, yes, fun motion picture with a fun cast doing fun things. It does get a little too weird in a few places that makes the humor venture into severe cringe territory, but when part of the climax of your movie involves literally hurting Flerken, space kitties, while Memories from Cats plays in the background, you've got to be the most miserable son of a Cree in existence not to chuckle at that kind of ridiculousness. I don't think I'm being unfair to say that Marvel fans have become spoiled and entitled in the last 5 years. Now, if every movie isn't as good as Endgame and doesn't conform to their own little personal fan theories, they will condemn it as the worst movie ever. Heck, I'm even seeing it now with the Marvels. I saw it 2 weeks before the Marvels came out. It's cool to be a contrarian, I guess. Only it's really not. It's boring and it's lazy. The Marvels is quality entertainment and a major step up from the last Captain Marvel movie. It has a fun cast, the chemistry between that cast is fantastic, and best of all, there's Goose. Also, there's an after-credit scene. There's an after-credit scene! I bequeath upon this film my most positive recommendation, and I implore you to watch it because it's just good. It's not Endgame, but if you're expecting Endgame level events with every new Marvel movie, You're just an idiot. I would say I'm sorry for saying that, but I'm not. If you're not an entitled idiot and would like to see more of my cinematic ramblings, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And if you would like to support me in this thing that I love, please, for the love of Tony Stark, offer me money on my Patreon. Links are in the video description below. Do it and I'll love you 3001. And be sure to tune in next time to find out what Jason watches.